Good evening, folks. Welcome back to another Monday Night Livestream. I never mean to always say the same thing every week, but I always end up saying it. So, hello. How is everybody? How has your weekend been? It has become a bit of a catchphrase. It kind of was never intentional, but here we are, Monday nights. So it's always kind of, what have you been up to? What's your weekend been like? Have you been keeping up to date on all of the FAQs that have come out of GW today? If you're a 40k player, are you looking forward to the Mantic Open Day at the weekend? As I've noticed Steve Evans in the chat has mentioned there. We'll come on to the Open Day a little bit later as the chat goes on today. But I've had a bit of a busy weekend hobby-wise. I've been doing some DIY stuff that some of you may have seen in the Facebook group. So I've been filming that as I go. So a little bit left to do on that one. Some more kind of shots to film and bits of sort of voiceover and all that kind of stuff. Then I've got to edit it all together. And then you get to see the table that I've made, which is designed for people that are a little bit tight on space but want a dedicated gaming table. So whether that's for board gaming, whether it's for kind of skirmish games, or if you've got the space for a 6x4 table, you can use the plans to make a 6x4 table as well. But the trick with it is it'll secure to any table. Means it can be it's nice and light. It can be transported about, so it can go on a coffee table in a living room. It can go on to a garden table outside if you've got a nice day. It can go into a kitchen table, a dining table, or it can go into a desk, as mine does in here. And then when you're not using it, it fixes to the wall and it looks like a piece of art. So that'll be coming this week. Hopefully will it be coming this week? I'd like it to come this week. Just depends on whether I can get all the editing done and the other bits and pieces. But yeah, that would be a nice one to get up on the chat. So let's have a quick look in the chat and see what everybody's up to. Christian was in nice and early there. Said I may be late to the party tonight. I know that you're in now, Christian. So good evening. I hope you're well, buddy. I hope you had a good weekend. Al Krabby said early bird catches the worm. Fast becoming my favourite hobby painting night. That's nice to hear, Al. Welcome to the chat tonight, and let me know what you're painting tonight then, mate. We've also got Flying Mammal who's in nice and early as well. Good evening, Flying Mammal. How are you? Hope you're well. Are you there on your own, or is your other half with you too? Steve Evans is in as well. Says good evening all. Good evening, Steve. Chris McEwen's in. Says hey, BlackJackers. Hello, Chris. How are you doing, buddy? Not well. I was going to say we'd not spoken in a little while, but we had a little chat on Facebook Messenger today. I hope you're well, mate. For anybody that I think it might just be on your personal Facebook, isn't it, mate? But Chris has been converting one of those Fallout Pip-Boy units, the ones that I think he got it with Fallout 4, I think it was. But he's converting it to put LEDs in and a little Bluetooth speaker. Looks pretty swish, mate. Nice piece of work that you're doing there. We've got Mark in from, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Steve Evans says, who's going to Mantic Open Day this Saturday? I certainly am, so we'll have a little bit of a chat about that in a bit. Mark's in from Dice Tales. He says, evening. Evening, Mark. How are you doing, fella? Were you at the, I didn't see the list of everybody that had played, but were you at the not conflict, sorry, what was it called again? The Vanguard event at the weekend, mate. Let me know how you got on, if you enjoyed it, if you were there. Furious George says, lock up your daughters. It's Furious George. Evening all. Hope everyone is well. I haven't got a daughter, mate, so thankfully that hasn't had to be done. But I'm very well. Thanks very much for asking. Christian, our first member of the evening there as well, said he's made it. Evening all. Good one, buddy. VJ says, morning all. Just put the kettle on. He needs a cuppa at 6 a.m. Good morning, VJ. Thank you so much for coming in again. I know it's always a bit of a time difference, is putting it mildly, but yeah, thanks for coming in, buddy. Always do appreciate it, all the way from down under, over in Sydney. Dice Tale says, what's this one's topic? I play too many game systems. No, it's not actually. So the topic for this evening is, if I remember the chat title, is something about is wargaming too fractured to ever become mainstream? And I posted it up in the Facebook group. There was a little bit of chat went on, and I intentionally didn't get involved in it because I wanted to keep my thoughts for tonight, but I also wanted to let the chat develop amongst people and see what they thought. And I think the person that probably kind of was on my wavelength at that time, or certainly the point of view where I was coming from, was Michael, so Malkavian, if he gets in the chat later on tonight. And what I'm trying to get at is, sort of as a hobby, is the hobby of wargaming, and I'm using that as a very broad term, is it so fractured that it almost limits its growth because of it? That probably sounds a little bit cryptic at the minute, but we'll come on to it. I'll go into more detail when we get to the chat, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. Furious George is saying the VG must be over the ditch then. Peter Nicholas is in. Good evening, Peter Nicholas. Another one of our members in as well. He says, hello peeps, he says the ABBA sing-along. That's Tuesdays, mate. So if you want to come back tomorrow for the ABBA sing-along, good evening, mate. Nice to see you. VJ is just saying he's outside of Sydney there. Mark saying, who'd win the troll? Or who'd win the troll, the army? Well, yeah, that's just jumping up the chat now. This is what happens when you lot get in. You start narrowing on. It basically jumps off the top of my screen and I can't see you. Who'd win the troll, the army men, or the blood angel? Oh, I'm not sure, mate. I think the World War II soldiers would probably be at a loss. That's for sure. I'm not really sure what the armor like's on a troll from a boulder. Who knows, eh? We've got Mark Berraclough in it. Good evening, Mark. How are you doing, buddy? Hope you're well. Furious Cheers, nice to see a show that's not about the FAQ happening today. I'll have to say, as I was setting up there, I had about 15 minutes left to go, and I noticed in my recommended list was Chapter Master Valric. So for those that don't know him, he's a YouTuber, covers Warhammer 40k stuff, and he was live streaming. And he's obviously talking about the FAQ stuff. And there was like over 300 people in his chat. The donations were flying sort of fast and furious. It kind of surprised me because as somebody that's not really into 40k, I suppose, certainly not to that level, it didn't really seem like the most, to me personally, not the most of interesting chats. But I'm sure if you're into 40k, it was hugely entertaining. But yeah, it just shows when I think he must be up at, is he like 90,000 subscribers or something now? Certainly over 70,000. I don't know how you keep kind of control. Well, I do know how you keep control of a chat like that. You don't bother basically. But yeah, so I did dip in just to kind of, not many other sort of war gamers sort of live stream very often. So it was more a bit of a recce really to go in and see how he does it, but doesn't do it any different than we do anyway. We've got Rui Louis in. Good evening, Rui. How are you doing, fella? We've also got Paul Palms in as well. It says, what's up, Canny gang? It's gone canny, son. Gone canny. Craig Lowther's in as well. Evening, all. Craig Lowther's in. Says, evening, all guys. Good evening, Craig. I got a bit tongue-tied there. I'll have a drink. And for those on Mug Watch, Flying Mammal, I know you will be, we've gone with the Wookiee Cookies mug tonight. My Star Wars mug, which has the little cut out there to put your chocolate digestives in. So cheers to anybody that's got a brew tonight. VJ's just saying he noticed the FAQ was released. We got Lee in, scouting the web there. Good evening, Lee, mate. How are you doing? Hope you're well, fella. And we've got Different Gear TV. Good evening, all. Just printing some PDFs, and I'll be with you. No worry, buddy. We'll hang on. Welcome to the chat, though, too. Christopher Warden's in. Says, no time for GW-based hobby this weekend. I was deep into my first hobby love, comic books. Nice one, mate. Welcome to the chat tonight. What comics are you into? Have you got a preference? I spent quite a bit of time around comics many years ago. I got into the Punisher when it was kind of first around. I've got a first edition Punisher tucked away somewhere. And I'm also massively into Batman as well. So I've got quite a bit of Batman stuff as well. But I never really. I always kind of struggle getting into comics without a bit of advice, I think. It's just too much to choose from. Brian Cian says, sup Andy, just painting some Thousand Suns Chaos Marines. When I first glanced at it, I thought you were painting 1,000 models there, I was going to say. Flying Mammal says, stole my idea. You can still make a small one to stick to your fridge, don't worry about that. Steve says, wait, they did a FAQ today for 30k or Lord of the Rings. No, mate, for 40k. We've got Kirill in. Good evening, everyone, he says. Good evening, Kirill, another member. How are you doing, buddy? I hope you're very well. Flying Mammal says, can't wait to see it. It looks brilliant. It's actually hanging on the wall over there, so it's been up there for a couple of days just to make sure everything's okay. The last thing I want to do is make a video and for it to pull the wall down. But yeah, it's not too heavy actually. I've designed it so it's it kind of comes apart, so it's easily sort of movable for one person. Pierre Nicholas says that's 2 members in. I was going to say I think it's 3, but I saw you correct yourself there. Mark says Vanguard Goblins are up for pre-order today too. I saw that, Mark. What's your thoughts? My honest opinion. What's your thoughts on the prices? Kind of surprised me, I'll be honest. Not that I'm saying they're not worth the money, because I think they're good sculpts. But if you compare them to, say, like a Basileans, the way that they were released in the kind of starter box and the booster, if you compare them to, what else have we had? To, well, any of those original ones, there's a bit of a price discrepancy between them. Bear in mind the size of the models as well. What do you think of that, mate? It'd be good, interested to know what you think. VJ says, so I assume everyone saw Endgame. Not yet, buddy. Far too busy this weekend to see that. And when I did check, it was all sold out. So, no, I've not seen it yet. So, stun me, please. Chris says, I'm having a bit of fun on Red Dead at the minute. My experience is that Red Dead and fun do not go together. I sold Red Dead after about 2 weeks or 3 weeks of it. I just really struggled with it. I felt like it was a bit of a walking simulator. It was just a bit slow paced for me. I don't tend to, when I do play computer games, I don't tend to sit and play for kind of 3 or 4 hours. So I need my kind of games to be a bit more fast paced and a bit more fun quickly, if you like. So yeah, it wasn't my kind of game, unfortunately. Flying Mammals there saying he sat next to me painting. He's not in the chat yet. How very dairy. What's he painting? Let us know. Chris is saying Fallout 76. It was the Mark 6. Sorry, buddy. I thought it was the older one. Dice Tail saying, yep, mid-table border conflict. I knew it was something conflict. That's not too bad, mate. Mid-table. It's always a bit of a funny one, isn't it? When you like mid-table can mean you won 3 or you won 4 games and lost your last one. It's mid-table is kind of it kind of hides basically just probably how you probably had a pretty decent day. Christopher Warden saying afternoon to everyone. How fella. Claudio's in as well. Good evening, Claudio. He says howdy all. Tony's in as well. He says hey up Tony. How are you doing, sunshine? Paul said he's cooking dinner, so can't contribute much tonight, but I postponed everyone's dinner until 10 so I can watch a bit of the stream in the kitchen. Thank you very much. It's much appreciated, mate. And I hope the family don't mind too much either. Flying says he's got a cup of tea. She's got a cup of tea. Doesn't the biscuit melt under the mug? It's in like kind of like, there's quite a, if you can see there from the side maybe. It's kind of kept away from the heat. The heat's above it. So it stays there nice and cool inside. Present from my wife. Where we at? This chat jumps up there. As soon as I turn away, it jumps and I lose my place. Furious George is saying chocolate digestive. Everyone knows the only biscuit you should be dunking is the chocolate hobnob. I'm quite partial actually to a custard cream. I think it's the most underrated biscuit, if I'm honest. Tony said, anyone else find the Batman rulebook a pain in the arse? I assume you mean the board game, mate. Yeah, and yes. And when I watched the video, because to be fair to the Monolith guys, they did make a video. I don't mean this to sound horrible, but the guy doing the video, English isn't his first language, and it's sometimes a little difficult to keep up with it. Really, it's not the most easily watchable video. I'll be honest. So yeah, I'm struggling, mate. If I'm honest, I know that Mark's been playing. He really loves it. I think I'll probably learn more by watching a video, to be honest, than trying to read through the book. Steve said he's on the West Country dry cider tonight. Nice, mate. I wish I was. I'm home alone again tonight. My missus is away with work, so baby duty tonight. If I have to dash off, I apologise. So probably best I don't have a night on the booze. Paul said, Viz is my favourite comic. It was probably mine when I was younger as well, especially sort of the home of Viz over here in the northeast. Christopher says, I like everyone, but Superman is my favourite. Interesting, mate. Batman was always mine, but yeah, Superman has a very long sort of history. Talking of comic books and stuff, I just started watching on Amazon Prime yesterday is is it called The Comic Guys or The Comic Book Men or something? And it's basically Kevin Smith's comic shop, which is called The Secret Stash. And if you imagine porn stars, you know, the one with the porn shop in Las Vegas where everyone goes and trades in all their old crap. Imagine that, but kind of more geeky comic book stuff. And it's on, I think season 3, I think it is on Amazon Prime. It's pretty cool, actually. People bringing in sort of rare comics and bits of kind of geeky toys. It's quite cool. Where are we up to? Al's saying he's painted Primaris Apothecary and some Reavers tonight. Got some new, better quality brushes. What a difference it's making. I'd say that as well, mate. My experience is that I painted with GW brushes when I first started because that was kind of all I knew. I bought everything from GW, my miniatures, my paints, my brushes, my little wash pots, everything, until I realised there was a whole wider hobby world out there. And when it was the first time I decided to spend a bit more money on some brushes, some better quality brushes, and they weren't a fortune, they weren't Winsor & Newtons or anything. I think they were Rosemary & Co. actually. I noticed a big difference in my painting. Just the quality of the brushes, it gave me more brush control. So since then, I've always kind of spent a little bit more money on brushes and then just looked after them. But yeah, what a difference it makes, yeah? Chris is saying I had over 16,000 comics. Holy crap, man. I don't know what else to say to that. Foul Mood Central says, good evening, folks. Good evening, Foul Mood. How are you doing? Nice to see you again. VJ says, goblins. I love me some gobos. Anyone got a link? If you follow Mantic on Facebook or Twitter, I'm sure they were linking it out today. Mark says, it's high, I'll admit. Stop me in my tracks. Was going to wait till the open day to see if there's any deals. Yeah, I thought it was high as well. I mean, essentially, I think it works out about £100 for 24 models, which, in the grand scheme of things, versus some other companies, it's probably not too bad. But versus other stuff they sell, it's like double the price of, like, if you want to get like an Abyssals kind of army, it's double the price of the Abyssal ones. It's just a shame that they've redone their kind of sales model after the first ones have come out, and now the price alignment seems a little bit out. That's the only thing I would say. VJ says no endgame spoilers. Thank you, fella. Where we are. Craig says on the paint table tonight, it's Spitfire Mark 9s with D-Day stripes for blood red. Mine are just there, mate. I would show you on my phone if it would show up on the screen there. I've just been Googling colour schemes for to paint them up, actually. I had my first little pushing of the planes around at the weekend to see how the game plays. Quite like it, actually. It doesn't seem too bad at all. And I'm also off to Warlord this week to spend a day down there, do some filming, meet the guys down there, have a look around their production facilities. So yeah, I think I'll be picking up some of the transfers, you know, the decals for the wings and stuff, because the ones you get in the Blood Red Sky set are just little stickers, but they do the decals on the site, so I'm hoping they've got some in stock when I go down. Andy Smith says, brew got a Stella. Do you know what? We don't really call them a brew in the northeast, but I've worked with so many people from the northwest for so long that when you have a cuppa, so I would say I have a cuppa or a coffee, they call it for a brew. You come for a brew, fancy a brew. So it's kind of in my head now. I always call it a brew. There you go. It's not a brew, mate. It's a cup of coffee. Chris is saying the mug is very cool. I think so. Nice little gift it was. I think it might have been a Father's Day gift. I think it was, actually. Kirill says, Goblins in the pre-order and #1 of today's news. Sculpt's brilliant, less metal miniatures than other factions, so it's a big step forward. The sculpts are fantastic. I've seen the Angel Heraldes painted ones in the flesh last time I was down in Mantic, and they are absolutely fantastic sculpts. They really are. But then, to be fair, I said the Basileans were good sculpts as well. They were really good. The Priestess, I can't remember, I think it was like a Priestess, and the Ogre Guard, Palace Guard. They're really nice models. I love the Abyssal ones. I love the Northern Alliance one. They were all brand new sculpts as well. So it's just a shame there's a bit of a price discrepancy between factions, that's all. But hey, if they're worth it, they're worth it, mate. Wow, we're at Flying Mammal seeing some Lord of the Rings stuff for campaign. Nice one. I hope to see the pictures later on then. Thank you very much. Flying Mama says, your wife rocks. She buys me most of the geeky stuff you see around in this room, kind of like my Darth Vader helmet and my geeky mugs and all manner of geek stuff. Yeah, she's the one that kind of buys me these things as gifts. So she's embraced the geek. I think she's realised now, after we've been together for a few years, she either needs to kind of accept it or it's going to grind her down, I think. Where we are. Chris says, I like chocolate caramel digestives. Caramel ones are amazing, mate. The problem is, if I start on them, I eat a full packet. It's got Steve from Steve's Small World in, says, evening all. Good evening, Steve. How are you doing, mate? Not spoken in a little while. I don't know whether I've just missed some of your comments, mate, or whether you've been a bit quiet or whatever, but nice to see you, buddy. I hope you're keeping well. Steve Bonner says, last day of the Protoss Games clearance sales for AVP. I saw it's been all over Facebook recently, like 40% off, wasn't it, to clear all that stuff out. It's a real shame, I'll be honest. Like, would have been nice to see that kind of thing carry on. Tony saying, got the Batman basic rules down, but finding those other bits like elevation, she's jumped off top of my screen, bonuses, etc. is a nightmare. Yeah, I don't think I've got that far yet, to be honest. Chris is saying the D&D comics are amazing. I didn't even realise they were. They were D&D comics, mate. Andy Smith, have I said hello to you as well, Andy? I remember reading your name, but I'm not sure I said hello. Good evening, Andy. He says, who's bought Hellboy? I've got my Kickstarter one here. Has anybody picked up the retail version? Anybody pre-ordered that one? Mark says to Tony, yeah, I'll let him have a chat there. VJ saying he loves comic book guys. That's what it's called, yeah. Pity they stopped now. I actually went to the Secret Stash last time I was in the US 3 years ago and met Walt and Mike. The other guy, I'm trying to remember his name now. The one that's kind of the taller guy with the long hair. His name escapes me now. However, he's got a very English sense of humour, very sarcastic. I quite like that. Steve saying to Andy that he got the Hellboy. It's a great game. Certainly is, buddy. Skullmuncher's in. Good evening, fella. Hope that painting's going well. He said he's painting up some warriors of he's painting up some warriors for battle companies. I'm not even going to try and pronounce them. That's why, mate. Did you pick up the battle companies book? Did I see? Was that in your little stash of stuff that came over the weekend? What are you thinking? Is it everything you wanted it to be? Andy said it's got a daughter's kill team, Drakari, coming on well. Very nice, buddy. Very nice. Getting the family involved there. Awesome. Flying Mammal says, awesome, Adam. I don't know who's Adam that you've been. I must have missed that somewhere. VJ saying, not really into Mantic stuff, but after chatting with Uncle Adam yesterday, I'm thinking about doing a Space Skaven Veeman homebrew kill team. Very nice, yeah. Mantic stuff has... I bought Mantic stuff when Mantic first started. So right, like when the Kings of War rule set was first created, when it was just a little bit of a kind of a 4-page sheet that was included inside those video cassettes. When they only had the dwarfs, I think it was, and the elves and the undead at the time. I bought some of that stuff just for some cheap miniatures when I was trying to get my kids into gaming. And the undead stuff was fantastic. The dwarf stuff was a bit of a mixed bag, but very characterful. I like it. But over time, the qualities kind of rise and fall, basically, depend upon what kind of materials they've used, depend upon what the game was. However, the stuff that they've been knocking out for about the last 2 years, I would say from probably Walking Dead was probably the biggest kind of step on for my mind. From Walking Dead onwards, they've been on a real kind of upward trajectory. The guy, Gigi, who does a lot of their sculpting now is fantastic. He did all of the Hellboy stuff. He's a hell of a sculptor now. And I think they've really raised their game. So while some of the older stuff might be a little bit dubious, anything that's news, spot on. I'm going to try and catch up again now. Here we go. Foul Mood saying, thanks, doing all right. Well, what's everybody up to tonight? I'll let you all answer that in the chat. I'm doing a live stream, mate. Kirill says, on last week I was participated in a big Kings of War battle on the Sunday. 5,000 points aside. I saw some of the pictures, buddy. That was an awesome table. Please do share some pictures in the report in the Facebook group. It'd be really good to read that. Thank you very much. VJ says he'll check out their gobos. Yeah, the new gobos are nice, mate. They're starting to do a lot of their stuff. They get painted by Angel Heraldez now as well, which really shows it off to its best. But yeah, I mean, the things like the Mantic Giant just kind of shows how far things have come for them, really. Kirill saying he wants to say that there was a lot of great painted minis and terrain, almost every post there. That is great. It's really cool to see so much different stuff getting shared. I mean, that's what I love about these chats, and I love about the channel, and I love about the Facebook group. So many different games. There's no kind of like, there's none of this like, oh, you can't post that here because it's not 40k. Covers everything. Flame almost says it was meant to say cool at Andy Smith. I was looking for somebody called Adam. I thought I'd missed them in the chat. VJ saying brew equals beer in Australia. It means beer here as well, mate, to be honest. For some reason, it's because you brew a cup of tea. So like, you basically, when you put your hot water in with a tea bag, you let it kind of brew. So that's where it comes from, I guess. Andy says, where is Mantic? It's in Nottingham. They're in Nottingham, mate. They're basically kind of how can I put this? So that they're based in a place called Bulwell, which is just kind of out on the outskirts of Nottingham. And Ronnie Renton, who basically founded Mantic, started it up, used to be pretty, I think I'm not paraphrasing this, but he was pretty much GW's number 2 back in the day. He was quite sort of, he was very senior. He certainly used to run all of the American business. And I think he was kind of like head of marketing or something like that at one point as well. I'm not entirely sure of all these titles he's had over the years, but he was a pretty senior guy within GW. Obviously, he decided to go off on his own at some point, start up a little a company selling affordably priced miniatures that could be used in a certain other game system, and it kind of grew from there. Really got Alessio Cavatori to write the Kings of War rules, and I guess it kind of it grew from there, really. Craig saying, defo worth getting the decals, makes all the difference once finished. When you're down there, you should ask if they plan to back to the hard plastic or sticking with metal. I was looking at that the other day. A lot of the expansion ones are metal now, aren't they? When I was chatting to, I can't exactly remember what his title is now, but my contact within Warlord now, I think they were from things like Cruel Seas, they were struggling to keep up with the demand on it because they resin cast all of the ships for Cruel Seas. It's a shame they don't resin cast the planes as well, to be honest. That would have been quite nice, but maybe it's... yeah, it is. I guess for that kind of game, the metal doesn't bother me too much as long as they're nice, clean sculpts. Alcyon, love the look of Blood Red Skies. My granddad flew in a Lancaster crew and always made out of Spitfire pilots as superheroes when he spoke to me about it as a kid. As a result, I've loved them since. I guess we look back on it now a little bit like romanticised and stuff, but as I've been learning more and more about World War II, which I'll be completely honest, I was quite naive to, if I'm honest, as I've learned more and more about it to try and kind of to see whether the historical gaming is something I'd be interested in. Things like the Battle of Britain and understanding kind of the Germans coming over and kind of bombing our airfields and then accidentally bombing London, which then kind of turned the Battle of Britain in a different direction. Those guys, I mean, the amount that kind of got shot down, I mean, very, very light armoured. They really were kind of like, they really were heroes, really. Getting in those planes, getting up there, there wasn't a lot of chance of you coming back, to be fair. Paul Bombs is in Foster's. Foul Mood Sentinel is in Loon Curse looks fun. It's another starter set for AOS, isn't it? Which is... just what AOS needs again, isn't it? Another starter set. Flying Mal says she's coming to the cool side. She was. I think she probably says she's drifting away from the cool side if you ask her. PJ is saying that's the beer that we send for tourists. I don't think anybody drinks Foster's here. You hardly hear of it so much now. I used to work for the company that had Foster's in the UK, which was Scottish and Newcastle breweries. We used to have Foster's as one of the beers when I worked there. Let's have a look. Mark's saying Jason Mewes. No, it's not Jason Mewes that works there. There's a tall guy with a kind of with like long hair and a beard, and I forget what he's called. It'll come back in a bit. Brian. It might be Brian. He's called actually. I've just saw it on the screen. Yeah, Brian, the really sarcastic one. Yeah. He always seems to chime in with some kind of sarcastic comment, but it feels a very British sense of humour. We've got Henry Mendes in it. Good evening, Henry. How are you doing, fella? We've got Johnny Jambo in as well. Says evening, Legacies. So the Mantic Gobbos are finally here, just as I spend my pennies on War of the Ring. Far too busy straining my elves. Krista Warden there saying everybody knows that Boom produces a 40k comic book, right? No, I didn't know that, mate. I didn't know that. Steve said first division of Forge Fathers from Warpath was good for the price, but the new sculpt and vehicles are great. Shame about the suspect pricing increase for the vehicles. I'm not as close on a lot of the vehicle stuff, mate. It's more that over time, I think each new thing gets priced accordingly, which I completely agree with. And what it means is that they're not just bumping the price of everything else up in the background. However, things then start to seem a little bit unbalanced. VJ is saying doesn't know him personally. No, I see. His sarcasm can be pretty nasty at times. Oh, I wonder if I missed. I must have missed some of that conversation, buddy. Skullmunch is saying Battle Company's book was in his stash of goodies. I thought I remember seeing it, mate. It's absolutely fantastic. Such a nice way to play. Can't wait to get started. Chris is saying Mantic's resin stuff is probably my favourite resin gear. Love the level of detail and how clean the models are. Yeah, the great examples would be the Governor or Glenn on horseback. Definitely would agree with those, buddy. Fly Mal saying hashtag BlackJack painting challenge. Yes. We've got a new one coming up soon. What's the date today? Let's have a look on my phone here when it eventually comes up. The 29th. So we've got a new one coming up in the next couple of days. So you've got a couple of days to get your April ones in. And then I'm going to try and display them somehow. Because they're solely hidden away in the event page at the minute. Chris is saying after Mantic, I'd probably say TT Combat for quality, but I hate their release agent. I was just going to say the Rumble Slam stuff seems really smooth, and I mean it was great quality, but seems really smooth and shiny. I had to give it a real kind of scrub before painting them ones. VJ says so. Both GW and Mantic are in Nottingham. That must be crazy. Everybody is pretty much in Nottingham, buddy. So basically, because of GW, anybody that starts up kind of tends to start up from somebody that's broken away from working at GW at some point. So within Nottingham, we've got people like Warlord Games is in Nottingham, ran by ex-GW staff. We've got Mantic obviously in Nottingham as well. We've got River Horse is in Nottingham, again, ex-GW staff. Who else is there as well? Bad Squiddo Games is in Nottingham. Annie Norman, she has her place in Nottingham. Needy Cat Games are also in Nottingham as well. So James and Sophie, basically ex-GW staff members as well. So everybody, I mean, there's stacks more as well. I'm just doing the ones off the top of my head at the minute. There's stacks more. To be honest, in the UK, it's more unusual for a company to not be in Nottingham if they're involved in the games industry. So the ones that really stand out, I think, is you've got people like Steamforge are in Manchester. You've got Mythic Games are in Newcastle, so not too far from me. And then you've got Modifius, who are down in London. And outside of that, pretty much everybody else is Nottingham based. Steve says that Ronnie Brenton, the Bard of Mantic. See, I'm just seeing if we've missed anybody in the chat I haven't spoken to yet. We've got Aggression in the chat as well. Good evening, buddy. Said he received his first Kickstarter in the former Hellboy from Mantic. Delighted with the vast majority of the miniatures and enjoying the gameplay. Good to hear, buddy. And Andy's saying there, it's funny how things are now. My last posting was at RAF Marham, a tornado unit, also flown by the Germans. So on Battle of Britain Day, we stood next to a bloke from the Luftwaffe at the service. It's quite funny, isn't it? I mean, as part of my day job, I've kind of pulled it back a bit recently, but I used to go into Europe a lot for meetings and have sort of sort of 2 or 3 day meetings over all over Europe, really. So there was always a mix of nationalities when we got together, and every now and again something would crop up about kind of World War II or something, and it's always that little bit uncomfortable, and it's not in my lifetime, like it's my family that sort of certainly that I'm aware of. My grandparents weren't involved in World War II, so it's always that little bit kind of distant for me, and I don't have that much knowledge to get involved in it. But yeah, when you start talking to people who are technically on the other side, it can be a little bit uncomfortable, that one. Where we are. We've also got Legionnaires. Good evening, Legionnaires. He says there was Andy Chambers' old company that did Starship Troopers in the US. Yeah, Andy Chambers did Blood Red Skies as well, didn't he, for Warlord? And I think did he also do the Rogue Trooper one as well? Did he do that as well, I think, for them? VJ saying, wow, so many gaming companies, definitely going to have to spend some time there next, especially considering I'm looking at getting into designing and producing my own minis. Very nice, buddy. I'd be interested to hear more about that. Yeah, if you ever came to the UK, spending a little bit of time around Nottingham, you could pretty much visit all of the companies. So as an example, I'm going down on Friday. I've got a day at Warlord Games. I had a message from Riverhorse today as well to say would I have some time to pop in and see them as well while I'm in the same building, actually, because Warlord and Riverhorse are in the same building. I'm then staying overnight, and then I'm visiting Mantic the next day for their open day. So I'm visiting sort of 3 of the companies in 2 days. Chris McEwen says Andy Chambers also did Mars Attacks. I don't think I realised that, mate, actually. Death by Die's in as well. Good evening, Death by Die. Said, I don't think the hobby is too fragmented. It's just niche. Because of the different elements of the hobby, it can put people off. More than half the nation would say they're incapable of an art hobby. Well, first of all, welcome to the chat. And so I think that is as good a time as any to get on with the subject. So what do I mean about is it too fragmented? So I'm talking specifically about, in order for wargaming as a hobby to become much more mainstream, and when I say mainstream, do I think it's ever going to get to the levels of kind of console gaming, PC gaming? Probably not. I think, well, I'll come on to some of the reasons why I think not. Could it grow to something about the size of where D&D is now, where it's becoming mainstream media kind of thing, celebrities getting involved in it? Probably not. So, why I think it's too fragmented is multiple reasons. So one is the hobby itself. So if you want to play, let's use 40k as an example because it's probably the biggest game in the world right now. If you want to play 40k, you need to buy your miniatures. So you need to know what you're buying to start with. You then need to build your miniatures. So you need to learn how to kind of do a little bit of modeling, be able to kind of glue things together, use files, use clippers, use knives. So if you're into modeling, great. If you're not really into modeling, that's almost the first barrier there. Once you've built them, you're probably going to want to paint them. So then you've got to then kind of buy all of your different bits of paint and stuff. You've then got to learn basic skills in how to prime, base coat, wash maybe, bit of basing. Then you might not be into the painting, you might not be into the building, you might not be into the modeling aspect, but you have to get through that to get to the part where you play. Maybe you're not into the playing side of it. Maybe you just want to build the models and kind of you're interested in the lore and the background and stuff. When you get to the point where you play, you then have to learn to kind of play the game and stuff as well. So even if we ignore the kind of all of the, in fact, no, let's not ignore it. You've also got people who maybe are just interested in the lore. So people who only like to read the kind of Horus Heresy books, the Black Library stuff. Maybe people like to build an army that represents somebody within a book that they've really liked, but they're not really interested in playing the game. So already, even just in this one game, there you have a fragmented people. So some people that maybe only like to build models, some people that only like to paint models, some people that only like to read up on the lore, some people that only like to play the game, and then a mix of people that like different aspects of that as well. So as a hobby, it's really it's quite fractured to start with. You then dial on top of that the amount of different games there are now. So back when I first started playing as a kid, you pretty much had Warhammer Fantasy and you had 40k. That was pretty much it. If you wanted to get into wargaming, there was that. You also had a lot of historical stuff, but historical stuff seemed a little bit more hardcore, I think. You really had to be into it. You had to know where to go shopping for it. It was probably, a lot of it was kind of online mail order before the days of the internet, where 40k was on the high street within Games Workshops. You bring in now all of the different companies that we've just been talking about. We've just talked about all of the different companies dotted about, all the different aspects of the hobby. You bring that in, and then the wargaming community, if you like, becomes even more fractured and split across many games and many aspects of the different things. So I've just seen a comment there in the chat by Death by Dyson. Does it need to be mainstream? It doesn't need to be mainstream, but it needs to grow in order for it to survive against all of the other things that are around us. So I know things are doing pretty well at the minute, and I know we're going through a little bit of a resurgence, I would say, but these things come in waves. If wargaming wants to continue into the future, it has to be able to become a bit more mainstream. Look at D&D, basically. Look at how D&D's changed, and it's having that real resurgence now. It's become more accepted. But the thing with D&D is and you can spend hundreds of thousands of pounds, but it's a lot. I would say the barrier to get into it maybe isn't quite so high. So you can buy your starter set, you can play with somebody that already plays. You don't have to buy lots of miniatures, you don't have to build lots of miniatures, you don't have to paint lots of miniatures. Somebody more experienced will probably run a campaign, and the newer people will probably just turn up and be part of it and be coached through it. When it comes to wargaming, it's just so fractured and split. If I then compare that to, say, board gaming, the investment in time and kind of energy getting into board gaming is relatively low. You buy a board game, you take it home, you unbox it, you learn how to play it, and you play it. There's also not that kind of almost rivalry between board gamers. So it's not a case of, well, I'm buying this board game and that's your board game and I'm never going to play yours and you're never going to play mine because it'll take far too long to learn this kind of thing. So board gamers tend to come together as a community. So there tends to be a much tighter knit board gaming community. Same with Dungeons and Dragons. They might all be playing slightly different campaigns, but they're all essentially playing the same game. And there's no kind of sort of, oh, well, you're playing that game and I'm playing this game, so we can't talk to each other kind of thing. I find within wargaming, specifically within like miniature wargaming, communities develop around different games, or they develop around different parts of the hobby. So you'll get painting a painting community. You'll get like a converting or kind of kit bashing community developing. You'll get a 40k community. Even within 40k, you'll get a Blood Angels community and a Death Guard community. It just seems really, really fractured, and we never all managed to pull that together to form a wargaming community, which then goes on to kind of to lift and grow the wider area. So one comment that was in the Facebook group from Michael Malkavian, he mentioned about how I think I'm paraphrasing now, but he mentioned about how GW, I think it was Andy Lewis had said GW are having a good go at trying to make it mainstream. And his reply was, they're trying to make GW mainstream. And I really agree with that, because I think what GW are doing, they know that wargaming probably has a level that it can reach. And as a business, that's kind of when their profits will stop going up, because they'll reach that level where everybody that wants to be in it is kind of in it. We might get some more people in, but we'll lose some at the other side, and it's not climbing fast enough to keep showing the profits they've been making. So it's no secret they've made a lot of profits in the last 12 months from licensing out their IPs. So we're starting to see the pop vinyls, we're starting to see comic books, we're starting to see the children's books, we're starting to see the horror novels as well, the Warhammer horror stuff. We're also starting to see there's rumours of a Netflix TV show or something coming as well, whether that's animated or live action. They're basically trying to franchise out the Warhammer IP in the same way kind of Star Wars has become a huge IP, and there's toys and there's kind of movies and all the, you know, like lunch boxes and blooming cups, all that kind of stuff. I think they're trying to grow by expanding the Warhammer IP. They're definitely getting more into video games. They're moving across into card gaming as well with things like AOS Champions. So they're looking to grow GW in a different direction, because I think even they know the miniature side, whilst very profitable, it might be starting to plateau over the next few years. And I think, and one of the reasons that this chat kind of cropped up was I watched a video today, which is like a podcast really, but it was a video podcast with Miniac, and he was talking about YouTube versus Twitch, which was the best for miniature painting videos. And I think that kind of got me thinking really, is that we don't really have a hobby that is necessarily viewer friendly. So sitting down to watch a battle report it doesn't suit everybody in the same way that we might sit down to watch kind of Critical Role or doing a campaign. We might watch painting videos, but they're very kind of tutorial-esque, and they're less about entertainment and they're more about trying to learn something. So they become more educational than actually entertaining at times. Depends on the presenter, but you get that. It just to kind of, in order to grow it as a in the way Dungeons and Dragons has grown and that kind of thing, I think it's quite limited, because it's even painting. So they were talking about live streaming on Twitch when they do painting, and it's like, actually it's not that interesting, because you might see somebody might be the most phenomenal painter, but if all they're doing for 2 hours is laying down base coats, how interesting is that? And if they're trying to concentrate on the painting, they can't concentrate on the chat, so therefore they're not particularly very entertaining. And if they concentrate on the chat to be slightly more entertaining, they're not concentrating on the mini. So it just feels that as a hobby, it's so fragmented, it's so split across such a wide varying between different games and between different kind of sort of art styles, if you like, between modeling and painting and gameplay, and kind of lore and that sort of stuff. It makes it really, really fractured. Now, if I compare this to some more popular things around the hobby, so terrain building has a wider appeal. So if you've got a channel, for example, that is about terrain building, you might pick up people that like making dioramas, you might pick up the scale model railway guys. Those kind of things are quite big, and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think would garner a lot of attraction does. So that's that. I've kind of rambled for quite some time there. I've probably missed a million kind of bits and pieces in the chat there, but I'll nip back and I'll try and pick up some of these. I'll start here, I think. Death by Die is saying, tabletop as a whole had a boost due to Geek and Sundry and Critical Role. I think it'll never be as popular as video games, but from my experience, it's much more rewarding. It's definitely rewarding as a player and as a person within the hobby. But I think you need I've got that mindset. I'm sure you have as well. You need to have that kind of creative mindset. I think it's not something you can kind of necessarily kind of dip in and out of a little bit. But I think Geek and Sundry and Critical Role have made tabletop more popular. So they've made things like board gaming more popular and role playing more popular. I think even if you go back to something like X-Wing, there's a reason X-Wing exploded onto the scene. So Star Wars, it picked up Star Wars fans, pre-painted, already built. You picked them up and you played the game. It was almost the easiest kind of entry point that you could have. Games Workshop tried something similar with Underworlds, but there's still a little bit of hobby involved as well. And I know they're push fit, but you still need to be able to clip them out. I'm not saying it's a barrier, but it's one more step, isn't it? It's one more step on the rung. VG is saying, yeah, until we get really nice single cast pre-paints, can't see it happening. Too much of a barrier to entry. Stephen saying, FFG Star Wars pre-painted ships can help with the entry into the hobby. I found FFG release schedule limiting. I'm not sure how much of that was an entry into the hobby, though. How many people got into Star Wars X-Wing, but then that was where it ended, because there wasn't any other game where you could go, Oh, they're all pre-painted and they're pre-built. I'll just get into that one as well. VJ is saying, I'm the opposite. Video gaming holds no interest for me as I can't put anything creative. Yeah, and I agree. Maybe it comes back to what I was saying before, how I can get a kind of a half an hour, an hour's burst of entertainment from just playing a quick game. I don't need to invest more time and energy and thought into it. I've got other stuff that I do that's more creative, such as this, but maybe that's how it is. Maybe that's the whole point, that you physically can just dip in and dip out of it. Paul is saying, I think GW profits would suggest it's growing. It is growing, but if you go back and have a look at it, a lot of their profits have come from third party, from licensing stuff. So the money that they got from all of the licensing to make video games, the licensing they've got from sort of doing the kids' books, doing the Funko, the pop vinyls, all that kind of stuff. It's the way they've diversified a lot. Look at what they're doing. They're basically they're realizing that they're growing the GW brand. They're growing the Warhammer brand, and they're trying to license that elsewhere. Look, for example, how big Halo was, and then it came across the miniature gaming and didn't really go anywhere. They're still growing, and a lot of the reason they're growing is their release schedule is gone up so fast as well. It's what they do year on year now that's going to be the interesting stuff. They've had that big climb. They put loads of stuff out dead fast. You know, they redid 8th edition. They redid AOS 2. It'll be interesting now year on year to see how them profits keep going. Dave McKayson, good evening, Dave. He said there's loads of D&D stuff, even meeples. Yeah, D&D is definitely becoming more mainstream. I mean, it's you can get D&D kids books now, like ABCs and number counting stuff and things like that. I haven't seen them for 40k yet, but I just think Wizards of the Coast have found a way to reach a wider audience through whatever marketing way they've done that. Mark saying, do you think games like Fallout and current Bloodborne help as it gets video gamers into the hobby? I think it depends, Mark, because Bloodborne and Fallout to an extent are a bit more... Well, it depends. Bloodborne is a board game, and things like Hellboy will be popular. Look at how Dark Souls, how well that did from a Kickstarter point of view. Look how well Resident Evil 2 did. So there's definitely an audience for video gamers wanting to buy into physical, actual products. But I'm not sure that audience wants to build and paint stuff. I think they just want an extension of the games they love. Fallout, I've not heard that it's pulling up any trees. For all the license might be quite big, you never really hear about the game very much. Now maybe that's just like a YouTube bubble type thing, but I'm not seeing loads of new releases coming for it. I'm not seeing anybody raving about it. I'm sure it's a good game. Most are by the time they get to retail, but I'm not hearing a lot about it. Death by Dice is questioning, do you think it needs to be pushed into another mainstream media to get attention? For example, the Horus Heresy TV show would rip open the world to a lot of people. Yeah, I think it probably would. I think in the same way Game of Thrones opened up to a whole new audience by being on TV rather than just books. I think the way Lord of the Rings had a resurgence by the fact that they made the movies. GW bought the rights to that as well, so they piggybacked on the sort of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit stuff. I think opening look at how Marvel, once they plowed some real money into Marvel movies and started making things like Iron Man, and then subsequently the Avengers. Look how that changed from a very kind of comic book thing. I think the problem we've got is that the wargaming community or the wargaming business outside of GW is still relatively small. There's not nobody is making sort of tens of millions of pounds, and nobody's marketing. Nobody's spending big money on marketing. Nobody's trying to reach a bigger audience. A lot of these companies start up from people that are hobbyists and actually do this just because they love it. Nobody's really kind of, none of them are the next Apple kind of thing. Even even if I compare it to kind of some like we all take it for granted because we've all heard of these companies, but outside of our little niche, outside of Games Workshop, I bet nobody could name. People will be able to tell you Dungeons and Dragons. People might be able to tell you Warhammer or that workshop place that's on the high street, but nobody even knows about it. You compare that back to things like sort of even comic book stuff. Everyone heard of Batman. Everyone heard of Superman. For all they might not have been sort of huge, everyone's heard of them. So yeah, I think you do have to break out into a different kind of stream. VJ is saying that he thinks it's got a lot to do with people coming back to the hobby, and he says a lot of people he knows are coming back. I think we always get people coming back. I think once they kind of go through maybe their late teens, early 20s, and get out of it for whatever reason, and then come back later in life, because you probably never really lose the affinity with it. If you're that kind of person that got into it when you were younger, you're still that kind of person really deep down. So I think that people do come back to it, especially as they get a little bit more disposable income too. I think the problem is, are we still getting people into it to come back to it? That would be what I would question. Peter Nicholas is saying Horus Heresy cartoons at the weekend. It sold plenty of toys back in the 80s, that's for sure. Steve said board games can also be set up easier than mini games due to each board game being a full contained system. Board games have been around for centuries, kind of thing. You know, like people still play Monopoly, people still play Hungry Hippos, all that kind of thing. A board game feels it's just less investment in time and energy. You don't have to kind of commit to it like you do with wargaming. It's very few war games that you can just open the box and play the game and then put it away at the end. You have to commit to building and collecting and painting and learning to play quite complicated rules at times. And I'm not saying any of that's a bad thing. That's why we all love this hobby. That's why we're in it. I'm just saying sometimes that's a few more steps that make it that little bit more difficult. VJ saying at Paul there as well. It's a lot to do with 8th edition rules and also people who got into it around 2nd or 3rd edition. That's just jumping off my screen again. Where? Oh, I've just lost that one now. Yeah, I think 8th edition. I think they did a good job with 8th edition of pulling people back in. A lot of people who maybe drifted away to other games as well. Death by Dyson, perhaps community doesn't help. I've seen many people be certain company lovers or bashers. That's kind of my point really about it being fractured. So for example, we as a wider wargaming community, we all retreat into our little games really at times, and there's not a lot of areas of the internet that are like this, that are like multi-system games, and it's not like, oh, this game's better than that game, or you can't, if you like this game, you can't like that game. Some games are very much just, that's my game and I don't care about anybody else kind of thing, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's what fractures it basically. We don't learn and we don't kind of help from each other. Phil Johnson, good evening, Phil Johnson. How are you doing? He says Warhammer has a good chance of going mainstream. GW's kind of peeled off the big American challenger companies, Weird Miniatures and Privateer Press. Don't hear much from them anymore. I'm not sure whether Warhammer's killed them off. I think those two companies killed themselves off. I think they grew too big too fast on the back of GW not doing a very good job. Then subsequently they've both released some dodgy rule sets. So Mark III for War Machine and 2nd edition for Malifaux weren't the best, and they've almost killed themselves off a little bit at the same time when GW have had a big resurgence and they've sorted themselves out and they're coming back strong with more stuff than any other company can keep up with, so it's filling shelves in every hobby store. But I think it's almost that kind of way. I think some of those companies pushed GW to get their acts together, and GW not doing very well meant some of those companies grew too big too fast and couldn't keep up. Peter Nicholas says, would Warhammer only become mainstream by selling the IP to Disney? I'm sure GW would never do that. I think GW have the money to push it to a bigger audience. The profits they're making, if they reinvest that back in the right ways, they probably stand the best chance. But I think they're realizing actually they can make more money from utilizing a really rich background. Like, can you imagine if they turned it into a TV series or something like that? There's so much lore and history and background behind it. It's the groundwork's done. It's like turning Lord of the Rings into a movie, isn't it? And how big that was. If you've got a big director involved and you put the energy into that, it really does kind of make a big difference. But you need the money behind it. You need that established background. So, for example, you couldn't say the same thing with Mantic, with Kings of War and the Mantica background. Yes, they've got a background to it, but it's nowhere near as rich as say 40k. Look at how they were with it. They're not trying to push AOS stuff into mainstream at the minute, are they? I've just had a super chat there as well from VJ Morph. Thank you very much, buddy. Much appreciated. Always a nice surprise when somebody does that. So thank you very much, buddy. Yeah, GW are not pushing hard with trying to sell the rights to AOS or trying to sell the rights to Necromunda. They are leveraging a lot of the future of GW on the background of and the success of Warhammer 40,000. That's going to be really interesting. There's no other miniatures company really has that kind of rich background to really springboard from. Where are we at? We got Paulie P. Good evening, Paulie P. How are you doing, my friend? Hope you're well. He says, have you seen the deal Steamforge have pulled? 5 million investment with Ian Livingston on the board. I have seen that, and how can I put this? I think there's more to it than we'll first seem. Let me just say that. I feel like I know more than I can let on. And when a company gets that much investment, especially on the back of all of the Kickstarters that they've done, which has allowed them to fund everything they've done, it feels like the money was needed. Let's just say that. VJ saying he agrees that the toxic elements of the community, people like Arch Warhammer, certainly won't help it go mainstream. Yeah. I mean, it's a real shame because I'm probably thinking of it quite selfishly. So I'll make no secret that I would love to do this as something kind of full time in the future, whether that be in 12 months or 12 years, whatever it is. I would love this to be able to become that. And I think I'm starting to kind of realize that nobody is big enough to invest the money to grow it to something that can be that big. You have to invest in marketing. You have to kind of put stuff out there. The companies are relatively small and they're quite happy to make their profits. Basically, if it was your own company and you were making, if your company was making 200 grand a year, something like that, and everybody was taking a wage, you might be quite happy with that. But that's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. Look at how much money video game companies plow into marketing their games. It is millions and millions of pounds when they go in marketing. Look at how much. I mean, let's be honest. D&D with all of these celebrities that's on board, they'll be paying them a nice little kind of wage to keep them on board as well. To have them selling the joys of Dungeons and Dragons and things as well. I don't see that there's enough money in it as an industry for it to explode, for it to grow. I mean, when you think of even video gaming back when it was still quite geeky, there were some major players. People like Sony and Nintendo and Sega really pushing each other to try and grow it before Microsoft even came in. Big companies with lots of money, even when it was quite a geeky thing. If anything, Sony was probably the company that pulled it out of that. The PlayStation was the first kind of video game system that was aimed not really at kids. It was aimed at kind of these 20-somethings with a bit of disposable income, really. That PlayStation was marketed as that kind of, that big cooler thing. I mean, at one point, this PlayStation was meant to be an Apple product. So it's kind of, it's quite interesting that. Let's have a look. Paul's saying the hobby's really got him into Twitch. Never got into it with video games. What do you watch on Twitch when it comes to hobbies, mate? Death by Die says creating content via video is more difficult for miniature hobbies than video games too. It can be, but then yeah, it can be. It doesn't mean it's any less interesting to do though. VJ saying, I'm glad Champions is getting CCG players into AOS lore, but I have no interest in CCGs. Anything where you buy blind packs doesn't work for me. Yeah, I would agree with that. But have you seen that there's now money involved with the AOS Champions? So they've got £100,000 up now for grabs across a lot of different locations in gaming. So even GW are starting to put prize money up. That kind of paints things in a very much different light, doesn't it? This is what I mean about marketing and about putting money to get people into games. Look at what some of the big sort of video games have done with the money that they've put up for, like sort of, think about things like Overwatch and Counter-Strike and Call of Duty and the prize money that they put up, League of Legends. Kirilla is saying there, Paul, I was totally agree about skirmishes. Give people some freedom, friendly to players and not insist and do not press people. I would agree. Rui says, would it help GW to grow if they explore other IPs? Maybe a Marvel miniatures game. They have the money and would bring more people to the hobby. I think that'll never happen because I think GW have got a big IP themselves or a potentially big IP, and I think they wouldn't want to car crash what they've already got, and I think they don't need to do that. I think they're quite happy with people like Fantasy Flight picking up Star Wars licenses, and if they're seeing what a company, Fantasy Flight are a decent sized company, if they've seen how far they can grow with, say a Legion as an example, that had the potential to be a 40k beta, and maybe it didn't get off the ground as well as it could. It's picking up steam now, and I'm hearing a lot of good things now. We're a bit further, like a year or two into or a year and a half into its kind of life now. But that had the potential to be a 40k beta. It had the lore, it had the background, it had the fan base. If that doesn't pull people across into the hobby, you know, you start to wonder where they're going to come from. So yeah, I don't think they need to do that. Paul is saying the idea of 40k can be overwhelming. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, mate. It can be, actually. It's quite hard to get in now with so much background. Death by Dies saying to VG Morph, the phone app's good, you don't have to pay a penny. Yeah, that's right, buddy, I've played that as well. Where are we at? Busy chat. Paul saying you can be creative in video games, Minecraft, City Skylines. I think that's why Minecraft became such a big thing on online, mate. Do you think GW rebranding the stores to Warhammer will help push the name out there? I think that's part of it, mate, and I think it's also distancing themselves from just the idea of like games in general being a bit random. I think they're trying to like brand themselves as Warhammer. That's what this whole thing with the new symbol with the axe and the eagle type thing's all about. Furious George is saying the problem with becoming mainstream is it has to appeal to everyone. Look what happened with Star Wars lore since Disney took over. I disagree with that, to be fair. Star Wars was already mainstream. Disney were just trying to do something a bit different to try and take it into the future, really, because they're basically trying to make it last for the future. Disney have also taken over Marvel as well, but they haven't killed that. Do you know what I mean? So those things were already mainstream. That's why Disney bought them. Really, they were just trying to exploit them further. I don't think it has to appeal to everyone. It sometimes needs to be in front of everyone. Look at how board gaming is growing. Like what's given board gaming that big sort of boost? because that board games have always been mainstream. It's just that we don't consider sort of some of these board games. Like if I asked kind of some guy at work about board games, he'd say like Monopoly and Game of Life and that kind of stuff. You wouldn't necessarily think about board game in the way we do as well. Mark saying, do you think the fact D&D and many board games are cooperative in some way? War games are more competitive by nature. I think the competitive nature of it depends upon who you're playing. I think we surround ourselves online with things that are pretty much we think of them as competitive because we see all of the tournaments and we see everybody chasing the latest errata and trying to balance things out. Nobody ever complained about balancing board games. Do you know what I mean? It's so nobody complains in Risk that the Orange Army is kind of unbalanced or anything like that. I think it's more to do with the people you play against, and if you put tournaments into anything, people will complain about that kind of stuff, I think. Right, Paul saying he's got to go and eat now. This is a catch the rest of the stream later. Thanks for coming in, Paul. Really appreciate that. Andy Smith says, with YouTube, companies don't need to advertise. Do you know what though? That's the misconception, though, isn't it? They do need to advertise. They are advertising. They might be using YouTube to advertise, but there's a very small portion of the market are on YouTube, and that's why companies pay money to go to Beasts of War and have Beasts of War recording their videos. That's why they pay money to Geek and Sundry and to get on what's it called, the thing with Becca Scott. That's why they pay their money. They pay for the reach, basically. It's all right, kind of sending free copies out to a few YouTubers and stuff, but all that's doing is it's getting the word out there. Like if you think about GW, why did GW send advanced copies to people like Guerrilla Miniature Games? Why do they send them to Winter SEO? Why do they do that? Because they don't pay those guys money. They just send some stuff out a bit early, and it's basically just to flood the market with their product, like when you went the YouTube market, I should say. So they do need to advertise because they need to get eyes on it. But a lot of companies, sort of smaller than GW, don't have budgets that allocate money for marketing. So you'll never see sort of, basically it goes about as far as Beasts of War, and that's about it. You're never going to see them advertising on kind of Casey Neistat. You know, like nobody rings up Casey Neistat, do they, and say, do you fancy having a go of Kings of War Vanguard? Maybe they should, do you know what I mean? But like, not in the same way that somebody like Samsung, like look at Samsung as an example. Samsung don't need to advertise. Coca-Cola don't need to advertise, but they do because they want to keep their product in front of people's eyes. That's why GW do it, because they've got money that other companies haven't got. That's why some games disappear and get forgotten about, because nobody even hears about them. Nobody knows what they're up to. Andy Smith said he's back. Space Hulk, board game or war game? Board game, definitely. It's played on a board, it's self-contained, it's all in one box, there's no expansions, there's not multiple armies you can buy for it. Board game all day. Death by Dice says, I wrote a blog about this a few years ago. There's a huge amount of hate about GW games, and I argued that instead of bashing a company, why not promote what you love instead? Make it more positive. I completely agree, buddy. I did a video a while ago about Warhammer Fantasy and AOS, and that basically you don't have to put one game down to say how good your game is. That both can exist. In the case of Fantasy, it doesn't exist anymore, but you don't have to say AOS is a pile of crap in order to say how good Fantasy used to be, kind of thing. Claudio is saying the biggest German tabletop group so fixated on GW. You nearly get like 3 likes on something you post, then you look at the GW things getting much feedback reaction. I think that's pretty consistent, to be fair, mate. GW is much bigger. It's a bit like the YouTube stuff. I know for a fact if I just did a channel dedicated to 40k, I'd get more views and I'd get more subscribers than I do, but it's not a game I play. I can't kind of sell myself out just for the views, if you like. He says, then you have gamers who play more systems and are fed up by GW. I think it's not that fractured, but more of a dual system. No, but even the people that play other systems are fractured. They're fractured within their hobby of which part of it they enjoy, and they're fractured between all the different game systems. VJ is saying that it does... Oh, we've got Adam Edgar's just come in as well. It says, morning, Andy and your glorious members. Good morning, buddy. 12 Neef's in as well. Hey, 12 Neef, how are you doing, fella? VJ says that he agrees with Claudia. There does seem to be a bit of GW versus the rest vibe that fractures in the community. I think that exists, but I think some of that is driven by the community because it's a lot of people who go to other game systems are anti-GW, or they've been kind of... They've decided that GW is not for them anymore, so they come to a different game system from a place of, I don't like that company anymore, unfortunately. 12 News says, I feel tabletop wargaming moves too slow to be e-sport level. Yeah, I don't think it's ever going to become a spectator sport. I think we'd like it to be, but unless we get... Chess is not a spectator sport, is it? But I suppose golf is and cricket is. And they're pretty slow, so who knows? If it was the right game, who knows? That might be quite interesting. You wouldn't get it with, say, 40k army stuff, but would you maybe get it with something like Guild Ball? Something that's a bit more faster paced, kind of maybe easier to keep on one board, on one screen. VG is saying there, putting money up for tournaments doesn't really bring the sort of people I personally think are good for the hobby. I wouldn't disagree with that, mate, but however, it does show that they're trying a different tact. Death by Dice is, what's your motivation to create content? I've tried to get into a little more, but struggle, though being a full-time carer doesn't help. My motivation is kind of twofold, really. Initially, when I started it was purely, I wanted to be kind of part of a community that I don't get to see face to face. I didn't have a local gaming group, and I wanted to kind of try and contribute or spread the word about other games in a different way. Over time, I've really grown to love making content. I love all the background stuff. I love all the kind of the videography. I love the editing. I'm really into making videos now, and I also still love the hobby as well. So it's kind of twofold. It's grown into the thing that I started with, which is a community around it, and I'm really loving what I do, which is why I would love to go on and be able to do this full time. But maybe I will do in some form. It might not be as a YouTuber type thing. Maybe it'll be as a videographer doing kind of promo stuff for people. Who knows? But I would love to be able to kind of to do it that way anyway. Where are we up to? A few more chats here. Flying Marble saying, I thought 12 Nick said Power Rangers about to go on a rant about the amount of seasons they are. Yeah, I never did get into that. We've got Benja in. Good evening, Benja. How are you doing? Says, I'm getting into miniature board games like Descent, Gloomhaven, Mage Knight, and Village Attacks. Yeah, I've kind of, over the last 18 months, I've definitely got more into board gaming. Purely from, I guess it's from the amount of time and investment that I need to spend on it. I can get straight into the playing, which is the bit I enjoy the most, if I'm honest. I enjoy the playing more than the building of miniatures, and I hate the list building and all that kind of stuff. And I've found myself getting, as board games have become more miniature based, I've definitely kind of had my focus shifted a little bit at times. We've got Jason, the Wheeled Warriors, getting talked about now. We've got Rain in as well. Good evening, Rain. How are you doing? Says, hey, Andy and crew. Sorry I'm late. Was painting my camels. Those are looking pretty special, by the way. I really like them. 12 Neef says, that's why GW is releasing games in Barnes & Noble to get to a wider audience. Yeah, they're trying lots of different things. So the kids' books is a different audience. The fact that they've got sort of famous people doing the voiceovers for them rather than sort of James Swallow, who normally does them. So they've got Billy Piper's doing one of them, who might not be famous in America, but she's kind of quite well known in the UK. And David Tennant, who was Doctor Who, is doing the other one. They've got what's the guy called again? The guy that played Pinhead in the Clive Barker movies, Hellraiser, Doug. I forget his surname now. Doug somebody. He's reading the horror stories that they're doing as well. What's his name? It's gone from my head. He's reading the horror stories now as well. So they're investing money. They're trying to reach a wider audience. They've got those games that are going into Barnes and Nobles. They've got the pop vinyls. They've got computer games. Look how much of the old Warhammer Fantasy stuff, the old world stuff that they've licensed out with games like Total War Warhammer. They've got Vermintide 2, all of that stuff. They've got the new Underworlds is coming to Steam soon as well. They're really they're reaching out that way. VJ says, just a pity the Barnes & Noble game was so awesome, Blitzball. I really hope they supported more. I don't think those games are ever meant to be supported. I think they're meant to be one-offs, and if you enjoy them, then you go into a hobby store and you go and buy a Blood Bowl and you get more into it that way. I think that's the whole point of those games, really. Al saying, Fractured implies it's broken. I don't think Wargaming is broken, it just lacks a bridge between all aspects. Yes, maybe fragmented maybe is a better word than... I think it's... All I mean is it's one all-encompassing kind of cover-all Wargaming, but it's splintered off into sort of separate little groups. How could I kind of... I don't even think there's anything I compare it to, and that's the problem, really. That's one of the things I can't really compare. If you think about football, everybody's off supporting their own little clubs, but they still kind of come together to appreciate football, if you like. You know, there may be some rivalry between teams, and there might be rivalry between supporters, but people still appreciate football. They will still watch other teams playing. I honestly, I can't even... there'll be something, but I can't think of it, but I can't think of anything else that is kind of that splintered away. If you think about like model train enthusiasts, that kind of stuff's huge. You want to see the kind of views model train enthusiasm stuff gets on YouTube. It's way in excess of anything that we would ever see. And there's no competition in that kind of thing. It's just the skill of building model railways and doing diorama type stuff. Death by Dice says, where can I contact you directly if you fancy throwing me some advice? You can either contact me. I've got an email address, which is blackjacklegacy@gmail.com, or you can contact me through Facebook as well. If you come to the Facebook group, there's a link down below in the description of every video. If you join the Facebook group, you can message me there. You can contact me on Twitter. I'm at blackjacklegacy as well, so you can contact me on there and throw me a DM there. You can contact me on Instagram as well at BlackJackLegacy. So any of those places, buddy. VJ saying to Al Krabby, who or what do we think could build that bridge? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that it's a tough one, really. It's almost like some of the companies need, especially the smaller ones, need to come together to try and find a way forward, I think. Because I know they're all in competition with each other, generally. However, the people move between those companies so frequently, you almost want to see them kind of club together, really, in some kind of way to combat the big guys, I guess. Rain saying, the friend I was playing today didn't like camels nearly as much as you guys. Probably because they ran through his Urukai lines with a knife through butter. We got Henrik as well. Good evening, Henrik. Sorry, he said he's been here all night, just no time to respond. Thanks for tuning in, buddy. Really appreciate it. We've got Nathan Sky. He says, Trump wants to enforce immigration law in order to lower both limited cost and excess bureaucracy, which equals wage regain value, encourage job creation from scratch, lead to resurgence of new video games and cartoons. That's an interesting interesting viewpoint. Not being in America, I'm not that close to what Trump does. So yeah, not sure. Doug Bradley. That was it, mate. I got as far as Doug. I couldn't remember his surname. VJ says, problem is Blitz Bowl is so much better than Blood Bowl. I'm not a big fan of Blood Bowl, if I'm honest. I find it, maybe it's the people I've played against who are much more experienced than I am, and it didn't really allow me to kind of get a foothold in the game. I didn't really know what I was doing wrong. It was over with before it started, I think. I actually prefer Dread Ball, if I'm honest. I just find it a bit of a slicker, easier to grasp game, but with the same levels of tactics. Andy Smith says, so Kill Team, board game or war game? War game, every time. It has multiple lists. It has expansions that you can buy. You can pick different armies. Yeah, definitely war game. Rain says, about rivalry, I don't know if this is a universal thing, like board gamers disliking obnoxious Magic players, but in the club I'm playing, tabletop, it seems to be War Machine players versus everyone else. War Machine got a really bad reputation a few years ago because I don't know if anybody remembers this, but in the front page of the War Machine rule, I was at page 7, I think it was. One of the rules, or one of the kind of things in the book, was basically telling you to go and grow a pair, and basically to bring your A game and stop bitching about stuff. If you're getting beat, it's not the game's fault, it's your fault, kind of thing. And it created this very kind of aggressive nature, I think. This was, I don't know if it was in Mark 1, but it was certainly in Mark 2. And what you also found was the War Machine community grew from a lot of Warhammer Fantasy players who got a little bit disillusioned with it. They were the serious tournament players. They got a bit disillusioned with Fantasy and went across to War Machine. So it brought in a very tournament focused player as well. So it had a bit of a bad reputation a while ago. It almost feels like it's kind of died off a bit these days because of Mark 3 though. Rui says, will Warcry bring more players to AOS? I think it depends upon what Warcry is, buddy. I think that's probably part of what the design is, maybe to try and get people a foothold in the same way that Kill Team did. However, a lot of people are attracted to 40k because of the lore, but they don't want to get into building big armies, so they've started with Kill Team. I'm not sure that many people are that sort of fixed on the AOS lore yet. They might get into it because they like a few models. I think it just depends upon on how it starts out, because they started out by saying it was going to be kind of chaos. Then it seems like they backtracked, so they either changed their mind or they hadn't really released what they wanted to release, and saying that there'll be more factions available at release. I think until I know more about it, mate, I'd like it to do well, but yeah, I'm not really sure, if I'm honest. So then, folks, we're coming up to 10:30, which I'd normally kind of end the stream, but it feels like it's flowing quite well. If everybody's happy to hang about, we can hang about a bit longer. The little one seems to be, let me just check the monitor. He is absolutely flat out asleep. So yeah, I'm happy just to crack on a little bit more. So where are we up to? I'll say, and like you said about football, Andy, the game ties all aspects of that hobby: fans, commentary, coaching, console games. I think the $1 million question is how to tie wargaming together. Yeah, that's kind of my point, really. But when I talk about it, like I say, maybe fractured was the wrong word, and maybe it is fragmented. But it's almost like we don't really want to come together as a wider community. If we could all come together under one, I think the closest we get are things like Salute and things like UK Games Expo, which is probably more board gaming. Things like Adepticon is the closest we get to bringing together a community. Otherwise, the community tends to be quite separated and quite spread out. Death by Dice, he sent a request. He's created a group on Facebook called Tabletop Gamers of Wales to try and get Welsh gamers together, but also find gaming clubs. Yeah, I did something similar, mate. I've put together a Northeast England, like a Northeast UK Mantic gamers group to try and pull people together, because they seemed a little bit kind of, it wasn't a big sort of group together, but I've managed to pull about 50 people together now, and they all seem to be setting each other up to get some games, so that seems to be working. Paul said he's back for a minute. He likes watching a few painters. Samson Art is awesome. That's Sam Lenz, isn't it? He really is a different level. He's a hell of a painter. Nice to have on in the background. Watch the occasional Warhammer bat rep. Having them on in the background is quite interesting because then it's less to do with their painting and it's more to do with their personality. It's like listening to a podcast, isn't it? There's some things I'll put on in the background while I'm sitting painting or while I'm sort of doing something else. Maybe when I'm creating thumbnails and stuff. I can't do it while I'm editing because I need to be able to listen to it, but I'll put podcasts on or I'll have like videos playing in the background. But if you're putting a painter on in the background, it's definitely about that personality, isn't it? More than I guess it's like this tonight. There's a lot of people just sit and paint and just listen to me ramble on, don't they? I'm not saying I've got the best personality, but I just mean I think they're obviously just interested in the chat. It's background noise. It's almost like white noise, really, sometimes. VJ is saying Blood Bowl's rules are very clunky and old style. They were written a long time ago, so no surprise there. If they blended the Blitz Bowl rules with Blood Bowl for a new edition, I'd be in. VJ saying probably, I'm not sure what he's referring to there. We've got Rob's Tabletop World in. Good evening, Rob. How are you doing? I think I'm right in thinking, that is Rob Oren, I think, isn't it? If it is, welcome, buddy, and thank you very much for dropping in. It says Blood Bowl's great for leagues, one-offs don't work well. Yeah, I dove in, having never played into a little bit of a Blood Bowl league with a local gaming group. And yeah, I just got my butt handed to me because it was a league. Nobody really wanted to kind of show me what to do. And I have had a one-off game with my son, but the rules felt a little bit clunky. And like I say, I've also got Dread Bowl as well, and that was a bit easier to get into and gave me a similar experience, I think. One-offs don't work well unless you hear the other guy. Yeah. Mark says, Mark's in Death by Die. What area are you from? He heads home to Cardiff as much as he can. Furious George says it's only 9:30 there, so feel free to carry on. Paul saying, I'd like to know what they spent coming up with that new symbol. I don't think it's all that, but it does the job, I suppose. You will be amazed how much it costs to rebrand something like that. A company I work for, basically, I work in product development, and we have multiple brands that we own. And if we want to do any branding changes, it is unbelievable amounts of money. Steve Evans saying, Dread Bowl rocks, so easy to learn. I showed my missus how to play, and now she bars me most Saturday evenings. Yeah, I find it much more just sort of straightforward and a bit more intuitive. I think Blood Bowl works really well when you know what you're doing. Like I remember playing against somebody whose team, I think I might have been playing humans because they were in the starter box kind of thing. I played against probably Dark Elves or something like that who were so fast and were flipping over the top of my head, ran down the field and scored, and then they just kind of like castled up in the corner and I couldn't get the ball off them and I didn't really know what I was doing. It felt quite frustrating and I never really felt like I could get into a game. VJ says, as a motion graphics artist of 20 years experience, I think the new logo is great, simple and concise. Exactly what it needs to be, buddy. That's exactly it. Rob saying, it will be separated because of the multifaceted part of the hobby. You build, you paint, you play. Board gamers can't handle it. Rob, that was exactly what I said at the start, mate. I think just to kind of really quickly recap, Wargaming is, and I said fractured at the start, and maybe fragmented is the right word now, but it is so spread out because some people like building, some people like kit bashing, some people like painting, some people just like playing. Some people like different aspects of that. Some people only do some of those things. And then you then splinter it further by then splitting that across 100 different tabletop games. At no point do we ever really all come together and kind of bash our heads together and say, you know, like, what can we learn from each other? Could we create the best game by taking bits from this and bits from that? And what do you like about your game and what do you like about this game? I guess companies try to do that, but it's only like there's very few channels online, like, and I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but there's very few channels online that try to cover tabletop gaming as a whole, try to bring people together who all have different opinions and different loves and different likes and dislikes. I find that really interesting to get such a wide, varied opinion, but wargaming in general doesn't seem to be like that. Like, for example, everybody that owns a Sony PlayStation doesn't just play their game and ignore everybody else. They kind of, you know, they talk about all the different games they play and they go, oh, you want to try this one? It's really good. But then the flip side is the barrier to entry is a lot lower. You buy that $50 game or something and you're in there because you've already got the console. It's not about starting to build and paint, and people get protective about it. People get locked into it. People say, I've spent $1,000 building up various Warhammer 40k armies. I'm not going to jump ship and do something else. But then they go and spend another $500 and keep spending on that one game or whatever. That's the kind of thing. VJ saying, blends the two sides of the hobby and the name. Yeah, it goes pretty well. Paul said he's got to go again. Hang loose, dudes. See you, Paul. Thanks for coming in again, mate. And yes, it is Rob Oren. Thank you very much, Rob, for popping in. Big fan of your work as well. We've got Redwell in as well. Nice to see you, Redwell. Peter saying to Steve to try and get her to play a Blood Bowl instead of battering you as well. Andy Smith saying, night everyone. Good night, Andy Smith. Rob saying, really enjoy your channel. I think you do some fantastic work and you have a wonderful talent for this. It's a pleasure to watch you. Thank you very much, Rob. From you, that means a lot, mate, because I'm a big fan of your stuff as well. I don't always comment on everybody else's videos. I always feel like I'm kind of... I don't want to give the impression that I'm just kind of commenting just to try and get people to click on my stuff. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching your stuff. One of your videos that sticks in my mind as well was when you did a review. It was one of Mantic's games now. It might have been Dungeon Saga or something like that, and you weren't particularly happy about it. And I think that might have been the first one I ever watched. Yeah, I think it was Dungeon Saga. It was a Dead Zone. It was definitely one of Mantic's games, and you weren't particularly happy about it anyway. And I remember watching that one. I think that was when I first found your channel, buddy. Redwell's working on some Battletech. Death by Dice says, Blood Bowl's got me into this hobby, so it's my first love. It's quite a lot of people got into this hobby by Blood Bowl. I kind of did by a very convoluted route. So my first experiences of wargaming was by a friend I had at school whose older brother played Blood Bowl, and I used to kind of see his little miniatures all lined up on his bedroom shelves. And he used to go nuts if we went into his bedroom to look at them, kind of thing. He must have been about 14, 15 at the time, and we'll have been about 9 or 10, something like that, maybe a little bit younger. So yeah, very sort of through a very weird and twisted way I got into it through Blood Bowl as well. Rui says, do you think GW having so many games for our Go Chosen to Kill team splits the community even more? I would have said yes a while ago, but the more I learn about it, the more I realise the vast majority of people who buy all of the extra GW stuff are GW fans. So very few people picked up Go Chosen and then never played anything else. Very few people probably picked up, say, I don't know, let's think, Silver Tower, and then never played anything else. I think you tend to find anybody that plays 40k will pick up things like Kill Team and will pick up like all of the expansion stuff that they do around that. I think you'll find a lot of 40k players maybe pick up Necromunda. I think it's almost part of the reason they do it is almost they want to give you so much stuff to spend your money on, even if there's nothing for your army. So if you're a Necron player and you've had nothing for Necrons for a while, how about you buy this Blackstone Fortress and play this for a bit or something? And so I don't think it fractures the community. I think people just spend money on it. And I would love to see the percentage of people that just buy their stuff for the miniatures and never play the games. That'll be interesting. Kirill is saying, I think War Machine, one of the games that could grow bigger than 40k. It's nice lore, good rules, but some problem with direction and not so fixable. The War Machine lore is actually really, really cool. I used to play War Machine and Hordes quite seriously, really. I went to a lot of tournaments and stuff for it. And the lore and the artwork is beautiful. I really enjoyed it. I think one of the issues they've got is it started off as a small-scale skirmish game. They realised basically that when it comes to a skirmish game, if the only game you produce is a skirmish game, you're not going to sell a lot of miniatures because people kind of buy them and then that's it. So they tried to grow the game over time. So it went from relatively small model count to a lot bigger model count. And I don't think the rules for War Machine Mark II really worked. It kind of broke down, which is why they went to Mark III. and then it just kind of collapsed from there. And then coincidentally, they then brought a skirmish version out, which was called Iron Kingdoms, I think. And that hasn't really seemed to kick the game on. But yeah, the lore and the background is really cool. Adam saying only $1,000. Yeah, it was just a number off the top of my head. We've got Jeff Hoggin. Good evening, Jeff Hogg. How are you doing? He said the organisation should be Gamma, but Gamma has been useless for wargamers for years. I only really became aware of Gamma quite sort of last couple of years, I suppose, with the Gamma trade shows. So I'm not really sure what role they play in it, if I'm honest. Are they more just about the... I suppose they do have a role to play, because if they're about the trade organisation, you'd think they would try to do it. But it is quite interesting that there isn't anybody that tries to kind of gel it together. And maybe there's no reason to gel it together. Maybe there's no point. But I guess if you're somebody that is looking into wargaming from outside, thinking, where do I start? And back in the day when I was a kid, it was GW or nothing pretty much. Now, if you go online and type in wargaming, or you look on the Element Games website, you're just thrust into like a million different game systems. Where do I start? What's my route in? I don't know what the answer is, but I find it's a very fragmented or a very fractured hobby, because there's so many aspects to it and there's so many games. And nobody really seems to try and guide new people into it, which is where GW's really kind of cashed in, because they've got the money to have high street stores, and they flood the market with their stuff. Death by Dice says, you mentioned video games, but you always see Xbox versus PlayStation versus Switch versus PC. They're pretty fragmented too, but still mainstream. I think the difference with that, buddy, is I think that kind of fanboyism will always exist, in the same way that if we talk about football, there are some kind of, for example, there'll be some Manchester City players would never ever watch Manchester United on TV. However, the vast majority of people are just football fans who have a team to support. Me personally, I've got a PlayStation and I've got an Xbox. They've both got their pros and cons. I'm not like against Xbox. I'm not against PlayStation, if you like. But I think media maybe hypes up some of those kind of like fanboyism stuff, but I don't think it's a big issue. I think it exists more in the marketing, isn't it? Them trying to kind of say that my machine's better than their machine because it's got 10 more teraflops or whatever the hell it is, or we've got this exclusive game. So, and I think there's more about that in the marketing, but I think your general kind of person on the street doesn't really care whether it's Xbox or PlayStation. They play their system, they pick whichever one suits them best, or they pick the one that their friends play so they can play online, really. Rui saying Battletech has 2 new starter sets. No one talks about it, not even with the success of the computer game. Yeah, but Battletech is, again, Battletech, maybe it's just, I never hear about it. Nobody ever talks about it. It's never on a YouTube channel. I never see it on a Facebook post. I never see it on Twitter. Where are these companies just sort of pushing it out? Look, as an example, look what Warcradle are doing with Wild West Exodus. They are putting money behind trying to push that game out. Now, I'm not saying it's working, and I'm not saying they're doing it in the right way, but at least they know they have to spend money to get that game in front of everybody's eyes. That's what I mean about marketing. Skullmunch is saying he's a big fan of Rob as well. Started watching you with the Dice Tower guys. Yeah. Steve said he's quite lucky his local gaming club, got loads of different games being played each week. Members mix really well. It's funny because I remember when I first started at a gaming club, I went there to play 40k. I've said this many times, had my first game, didn't enjoy it, sold my 40k stuff, discovered Malifaux, which was brand new at the time. It had only been out a couple of weeks when I discovered it, and introduced Malifaux to a few people at the club, and I got a little bit of grief as a new person coming to the club, taking people away from games that they were playing, because there were some people saying, well, I can't play my game now because you've stolen all my players, kind of thing. And I didn't see this at the time. I just thought it was like, I've just bought all these cool models, people. Does anybody fancy a game? But I think they can still be a bit of rivalry. And maybe I've just hit the nail on the head. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's about people become very closed and they kind of say that game's awful and that game's rubbish to try and stop people leaving their game. And wargaming as an entire hobby is just a catch-all term, but actually there's no interaction between them because they're different. They could almost be different hobbies. It's why on YouTube, the channels that focus on one particular game, such as 40k, do well because they just focus on that one game and all of those people play that game and they all come to watch that. Maybe that's what it boils down to, is because there's no commonality other than the ability to play a game and roll dice. There's no commonality between games. Steve's saying he wouldn't say it. I'm a tabletop hobbyist as I paint figures and build terrain, 3D print, resin cast, play tabletop games, board games. The hobby's a very big one. Yeah, I think it's kind of as wide as you want it to be when you start including that stuff. Rob's saying here's the thing that people don't think much about. When GW doesn't get it, other companies really thrive and they get the show a different side of things. But when GW was on their game, like they are now, it really hurts the hobby because the smaller companies will not survive. I did a video a little while ago saying that Kickstarter was the best thing to happen to GW. And I think it was and what I said was basically that Kickstarter enabled smaller companies who didn't have the financial clout to start up and start making nice quality miniatures and start to hire good rules designers because they've got all this money from Kickstarter. That almost gave GW a bit of a kick up the backside and said, you need to get your game, you need to get yourself sorted. When GW were on a bit of a slide, games like War Machine did really well. Games like Malifaux did really well. Games like sort of Drop Fleet Commander came out of the clouds when Dread Bowl came around because Blood Bowl wasn't supported. Kings of War reached a different crowd because Fantasy wasn't supported. When they're on a bit of a downward slide, everybody else climbs. You're completely right, Rob. But when they get it right, they've got so much clout that they basically blindside everybody else. So they put so much stuff on the shelves of hobby stores that there's no room for anybody else anymore. And games like Malifaux die out, and games like War Machine die out. You're exactly right, buddy. Exactly right. VJ saying, agreed, Andy. It's about GW keeping product out there over multiple formats to keep their faction-based players happy. Yeah. Where are we at? Death by Dice says to Rob, heard good things about you here, so giving you a sub to watch some vids later. I would, if you have not subbed to Rob's Tabletop World, you should definitely do it now. Rob's got a bigger audience than me. He's certainly the more experienced guy here. But yeah, if you are not subscribed to him, definitely go and check it out. There's a bit of chat going backwards and forwards. Henrik saying, I never did Blood Bowl. For me, it started with Hero Quest. The best thing about Hero Quest. It started with Hero Quest for me as well, buddy. That was the first thing I really bought into, if I'm honest. There's still, you won't be able to see it now, but it's still up there on my shelf behind me. Rob was saying it was one of his favourite games, Dungeon Saga. That was it. It got in 2 boxes. The quality control was horrible. Had the same problem with Death Zone, plus my first and only angry video. Yeah, I think I can't remember why I came across it, but I was searching for something. But yeah, I thought it was a really kind of something you don't see on YouTube very often is critical videos. You get people ranting and you get people being negative, but kind of constructive criticism is a rare thing when it comes to wargaming. You get a balance between people of like, I've paid all this money, so I'm going to say I love it, or I'm a fanboy, so I'm going to say I love it, or I got it for free, so I'm going to say I love it. There's very few people are kind of constructively critical, and I thought that was a great video. Johnny's saying, you're one of the good guys, Rob. Seeing you have your heart on your sleeve in most of your videos, definitely. He says he's not here to take away from the great live feed, but thank you so much. You're not taking away from it, buddy. I really appreciate you coming in. We all learn from each other as well, so there's certainly plenty of stuff that you do that I learn from. So thank you very much. Get a room, guys. Flying Marvel says, have a massive stall taking up half the hall at a show. Yes, they do, War Cradle, and they're definitely they're throwing money at, there's no other company that throws money at getting their name out there more than they do at the minute. I don't know if it's working, and I don't know if it's being spent in the best ways, but you can't fault them for trying, that's for sure. Death by Dice says, I'm sure I've been dumped because of my teraflop. Peter Nicholas saying, I am not paying for your room while you're having the loving, that's for sure. VJ says, unfortunately, so many people have invested so much in their cultivated identity as a fan of X or X, they get super competitive and defensive. It comes back to what I was saying before. People almost justify spending money on a game that they're not particularly enjoying because they've spent so much money on it in the past. It's almost just like throwing good money after bad. It's like, well, I've got, we all said $1,000 wasn't enough. I've spent $2,000 over the years on 40k stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend another $1,000 on a new army because that might make it better. Rather than saying, you know what it is? I'm going to spend $200 and I'm going to try this game and see what happens. It might be the best game they've ever played, but they never get to try it. This is why I love going to conventions and demoing games and trying lots of different things. There's games I would never have even considered picking up if I hadn't gone and sort of demoed them or gone and tried them. So, Rob said he watches Man City all the time, praying that they lose. Horrible, glory, Man United. Henrik says Hero Quest was his entry as well. I think plenty of people are kind of, there's a lot of people kind of entered the hobby through Hero Quest, definitely. It's a shame that they couldn't, I mean, that is the perfect example. Hero Quest was advertised on TV. There's those famous old adverts about I'll choose my broadsword and all that kind of stuff. That was a game that was marketed to the masses. It was advertised on TV in the US. It was advertised on TV in the UK. You would never, Games Workshop would never advertise on TV now. They would never, like, they don't even advertise on YouTube, for example. So they don't pay for adverts. Well, if you know, when you see adverts on my videos or whatever before they start, it's never a GW video. Like, they obviously don't see the benefit in that, but it worked in the past and it got a whole generation into wargaming, didn't it? Flying Mammal saying Hero Quest. Peter Nicholas says, I think the fact GW have many more outlets keeps the opposition down as shop owners prefer items that guarantee to sell. GW make the biggest game in wargaming, and if you sell stuff on your shelf, people will have heard of it and they'll want it. And if you're selling it at a discount over what the GW shops are selling it for, people will come to you. I've been told many times that basically the GW shops are their marketing budget. They're there to keep them front and center in everybody's minds, and that actually they don't really make that much money. That they're there as a gateway, if you like it. If you're into retail and stuff, you'll understand what's called a loss leader, which is essentially when you sell something at a price that just draws people into the store. It's kind of a similar thing, basically. By them being on the high street and by them being most people's first entry point into wargaming, they try and capture you when you're new and drag you in that way. So yeah. Al says, I think that whilst GW may kill off a lot of games, if they weren't about those games designers, etc., wouldn't be about in the first place. I think it's changed a little bit over the years. There's plenty of games designers now that are sort of cutting their teeth on other companies now. And there are people that now go and work for Games Workshop who've come from other businesses. So as an example, James Hewitt, who did the rules for Hellboy, he worked for GW, like sort of in retail. He ended up through other roles in Mantic and co-wrote the Dreadball rules with Jake Thornton. Tried to get into games development a few times. Eventually got picked up by GW. Then went on to do Blood Bowl, did Adeptus Titanicus, did Silver Tower, did lots of kind of Codex stuff and bits and pieces, and then has left and done his own thing again. So I think there's other people now are getting into it from a different side, but originally people started at GW and then left and went elsewhere. People like Andy Chambers, people like Alessio Caratori, Yeah, just to name but a few, really. VJ says only 2,000 if we could do this all day. And they should 100% do a Hero Quest reboot. I think the problem with Hero Quest is it's not clear who owns the license anymore. So Milton Bradley, who published the game, Citadel Miniatures made the miniatures like under license from Games Workshop. I think it's a really muddy, and I don't think anybody really knows who owns the license anymore now. Henrik said he still plays Hero Quest with the kids, but they like it. I do not anymore. Christian says Hero Quest was advertised because it was an MB product. GW did the minis and the rules. Yeah, but even that shows Milton Bradley obviously knew that kind of advertising works, doesn't it? Now that Hasbro do they own Wizards of the Coast? It wouldn't surprise me if we start to see kind of them leveraging some of that stuff. VG is saying just remake the original game. Yeah, I think it's purely a licensing thing, really. Al says there's a question: why don't GW advertise on TV? My kids constantly have their interest piqued by adverts for toys. It just shows, though, doesn't it? I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, look at the toys that come out now. Like, I'm not, my little one's too young really to kind of know bits and pieces, but it worked for us. We picked up Hero Quest because we saw it on TV and we loved the advert. Even if they advertised on YouTube, if they advertised specifically targeting kind of kids' videos at a certain age range, which you can do, and YouTube advertising is still some of the most cost-effective advertising you can do versus advertising on TV. You never see it, do you? There's obviously a reason why they don't. Johnny says if Warhammer stores had a Starbucks in, they might be bankrupt. Me too, mate. Me too, that's for sure. VJ saying Milton Bradley probably had more to do with the TV ads. Picked up a full copy of Hero Quest a couple of years ago, so I have one for when my son gets old enough. Yeah, I've got mine up on the shelf there. It's got a couple of expansions in there as well. The Keller's Keep expansion and whatever the other one was called as well. They're all in there. And the miniatures will be painted one day, that's for sure. Al says, I don't think GW's target audience watches TV these days. It's all YouTube, Twitch and Netflix. Well, but there's the audience. Advertise there. You don't have to advertise on TV. But yeah, that's the audience, basically. They don't advertise in kind of tabletop magazines. I think the thing is, they need to find a new audience. So, but think about how many people still buy Airfix kits. You know, there's an audience there that they haven't tapped into. Think about how many people, like even from a board game perspective, they do have quite a big presence at the UK Games Expo. So they're purposefully trying to get themselves in front of board gamers, primarily board gamers, and yet they don't bother with Salute because that's not their target audience. There already knows that they exist, kind of thing. I'll go back to what I said before. It's like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, one of the biggest companies in the world. Apple, biggest companies in the world. Still advertise on TV. They still sponsor bloody like music concerts and all that kind of stuff. Microsoft's everywhere as well. There's a reason that companies advertise. It's about brand awareness and it's about putting your product and building it up to be cooler than it actually is and all of that kind of stuff. I'm not sure that I don't think there's the money in the industry to do it. I think that's half the problem. Kirill is saying the VJ, anyway, this will be a new game. Since then, the setting of Warhammer have changed dramatically. GW cannot be sculpted in such a warm, old-school manner. VJ says, I am tail end of Generation X and don't watch any advertising supported TV anymore. Yeah, I must admit, I watch YouTube, and that's probably where I see most of my adverts now. Or if I watch any streaming services where the adverts are forced upon me. Like we have ITV kind of hub in the UK, which is like an online version of the ITV channel. If I'm watching anything on that, there's kind of forced adverts on that. You can't skip them. I must have missed that in the chat somewhere. Chagrin, that was what it was, yeah. Johnny Jumbo says, Al Crabby, you just earned yourself 3 legacy points for getting the word chagrin in the live chat. Flying Mal says, got to go now. A night, everyone, and thanks for that. Thank you very much, Flying Mal. I think we're going to call it a night anyway at 11 o'clock, so thank you very much, and we'll speak soon. Al said, I like to see a simple model and system combo advertised on kids' TV. Kids would pick it up without the fear or intimidation of the hobby and move on from there. The barrier to entry is quite high. I mean, let's not forget, you do have to have kind of clippers and knives and all that kind of stuff. So it's quite a tough sell these days, which is where one-piece pre-assembled miniatures really come in. I'm really surprised they haven't kind of already done that as a bit of an entry point. You know, why don't some of their starter sets come pre-assembled? Furious George says, why pay for advertising when so many YouTubers do it for free? I think the difference is, mate, it's about professionalism, isn't it? Like, anybody can have, I say it myself, anybody can have a camera and basically point it at a product. But it's about controlling what gets said. It's about, we're not talking about reviews, we're talking about previews, promotional stuff, really kind of professionally. That's why they get Becca Stott to do some of their stuff. They see a benefit in it. That's why they've spent a fortune setting up all them new studios at their offices in Nottingham. They see the benefit of video media. The rest of the industry is playing catch up, if I'm honest. Different Gear TV says, what do you watch at ITV Hub? Towie? No, definitely not. Do you know what it is? I don't think I actually do watch anything. I think my wife watches bits and pieces. So if I'm sitting on the sofa, kind of sitting painting beside her or whatever, or watching something on my phone, I think that's when I've noticed it. I think she watches a bit of Jeremy Kyle now and again. That's what it is. Rob saying, when they leave GW and go to another company, these designers have the ideas to create gameplay, but they don't have that lore, and that's where we build the passion, what we get sucked in by the lore. You're completely right. It's why GW are cashing in on the 40k hit background in their IP. Other companies, they spend all of the time making the miniatures because people buy a game because miniatures look nice, and then they spend some time doing the rules, and then I think they forget that basically people get sucked in by a wonderful, rich background. The only other company I've seen who are starting to kind of make waves, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, are Parabellum. And they've done a game which has been written by Alessio Cavatori, which is a fantasy kind of rank and flank type game. And they have spent a lot of time creating quite a rich background for that game before anybody can even buy a miniature. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And Peter Nicholas says, now for a chorus of Super Trooper. Super Trooper was my it was the first record I was ever bought. I got bought a record player for Christmas when I was a kid, and I think my mum was a bit of an ABBA fan, and she bought Super Trooper single for me to play on it. Then I've got my wife there saying, I think that's because I outed her as a Jeremy Kyle watcher. That's what it was. And Death by Die says, GW's magazine series seems to have done well going through rules and easy to fit miniatures. It does, but again, it's been marketed to people who already are in the hobby. It's not been advertised on TV. You see these kind of, collect them weekly things that have got Batman miniatures in there. There was a Marvel one not too long ago. Things where you collect a chess set or something like that. It was never advertised on TV. It was never advertised on YouTube. It was only promoted to people who already knew about GW. And the people that have picked it up for cheap miniatures and cheap paint and everything else. There are some people that are getting into 40k through it, but the vast majority of people are just people that are picking it up for the cheap paint and things. Right, Furious George says, time to start his day. Have a good one. Thank you, Furious George. Nice to see you. Stevenson, Peter said he's flagging. I'm flagging now too, mate. I'm calling it a night now, so that's the end of the thing. Steve saying, better get some sleep. Thank you very much. Al saying he got sucked in by big armor-clad Marines shooting orcs with axes. Now I'm into the lore and the modelling. I think they're missing a trick. I don't disagree, buddy. Rob says, I need to go, Andy, but I would love to have you on my show. I think it would be great for your channel and would love to help you in any way I can. Guys like us got to stick together. 100% Rob, I would love to get involved, buddy. So somehow get in touch with me, mate. I don't know if I've got a contact details for you, but if you can, there's an email address in my about section. You can drop me there. You can find me on Twitter as well. I'm at BlackJack Legacy on Twitter as well. So let's get in contact, buddy. I would love to do something with you. And thanks very much for dropping in, and thanks for the kind words. Different Gear TV says, have you played Blackstone Fortress? Just ordered it. Looking forward to playing it solo. I've not played it, buddy, actually. But I've heard good things about it. I've heard mixed reviews, but I think you'll enjoy it. And Skullmunch says, same, I'll have the orcs with the axes over their head, black and white checks. Yeah, I've got that 5th edition set as well, with Marines and orcs in it. Was it Assault on Blackreach? I think it was. I've got that set as well somewhere. So, just after 11 o'clock, I'd like to thank everybody for being in the chat tonight. I think it's been a really good chat. I've quite enjoyed it, kind of having a bit of a ramble really tonight. I think these kind of subjects can either take over the whole night, or what they do is, what always happens in these chats is we never kind of come to blows over anything. We might all have different viewpoints, but that's the whole point. I like to have something that's not necessarily controversial, but that's something that will generate lots of different viewpoints, and that's what I really enjoy about these chats. So, thank you, every single one of you, for coming in tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you, VJ, as well, for the super chat. Much appreciated. And no doubt I will see you all in the next live chat. But keep an eye out for the videos. Keep an eye out as well. I've got an interview this week with Paint All the Minis. So I'll be getting interviewed on Thursday, I think. So watch out for Paint All the Minis, and you'll hear an interview on that. And at some point, looks like I'll be getting in touch with Rob's Tabletop World as well. We'll do something together. So thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.